You can go ahead and broadcast, I guess, Alicia.
We are broadcasting.
Okay. Item number 1, I guess we'll start with the public forum. We'll call it to order and then go to the public forum. Are there anybody that wants to make any comments from the public?
See anybody? Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so we'll close the public forum and move on to agenda item number 1, approval of the April 14th, 2021 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read those minutes? And is there any amendments to those minutes? Okay, nobody has any comments, any amendments?
I'll move to approve them.
I'll second that movement. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it and the minutes are approved. We'll move on to item agenda 2, Luxaire Report. Steve, if you're up, you want to go ahead and talk about some things that are happening out at Luxaire?
Alrighty. There's not too much to report for this month. Operations were a little bit down from the previous month. That was just mainly due to an insanely number of windy days. We did get all of the work on T2 done. So that hangar is just fully operational and we got some space if anybody needs it. And then the rebuilding of the other 2, we're still waiting on materials. So nothing going on there. And still got some events coming up in just about a week for the Civil Air Patrol open house and waiting on hearing from the flight school if they're interested in doing rides for the fly-in. But otherwise, we're planning on having that at the end of June. And that's pretty much what we got going on.
Anybody have any questions for Steve? Okay, we're moving on. Number 3, the chairman's report. So a part of what Steve was talking about with the fly-in coming up, I had the privilege, I went with Bonnie out to Pella this last weekend for the first fly-in that I've been to in a while. And it was great. I mean, it was like the first time I felt normal in a while. There wasn't a mask within 200 miles of the place. And, you know, it was a great outdoor event. But I guess my takeaways from being at Pella were they have a 5,000-foot runway, no taxiways, but there were several executive hangars out there with multi-million-dollar airplanes. So it wasn't that dissimilar from what we have. The only differences were that they have an approach and they have that 5,000-foot runway. You've got Gulfstreams, you've got Phenoms out there. Pella Windows has their own hangar. There was a lot of heavy stuff out there. And I guess it was proof of concept that everything is possible. It wasn't much different than what we have. I guess the biggest parallel is their location, you know, and we have that at Marion. So I guess it made me kind of appreciative and excited about what the future holds out at Marion. And, you know, I wish that more of the panelists have an opportunity to go to some of these other airports that are similar to ours and just see what is possible, because it's pretty impressive at some of these airports. So anyway, that's my report for today, and thank you. Moving on to Items for discussion and or action. Number 1, minimum operating standards. Who exactly is going to be speaking to this?
Well, I invited Jerry, and Jerry had some information he wanted to share and kind of talk through what exactly minimum operating standards are, and just talk through with the group. Jerry, I'd turn it over to you if you want to.
Sure. Thank you. First, I'll comment on Pella. As you may not know, the Pella Airport hopefully will be closing that in a couple of years and relocating that facility combined with Oskaloosa to a new site called the South Central Regional Airport.
Wow.
So for the reasons that Tim pointed out, the site's a constrained site. There is considerable corporate traffic and usage there. And because of site constraints, that airport, hopefully, as soon as we finish land acquisition, will be relocated.
Wow.
We're about 2/3 of the way through land acquisition at the present time. And I've been working on that airport for many years, too many to mention, but a lot of years, and with several issues that had to be addressed. With regards to minimum standards, I think one of our tasks is to prepare a set of minimum standards. Looking at the agreement that was set forth in 2015, and I'll use that along with the addendum that was approved, I think in 2018, as a framework to begin developing minimum standards. I think the first thing we'll do is set forth some definitions, so we're consistently talking about the same thing, and then we'll discuss minimum standards for commercial service operations, and then break that down into single service operator requirements or specialized aeronautical service operations. Most of those, including flight training, aircraft charter, taxi, aircraft maintenance, storage, and so on and so forth, are set forth in the fixed base operator agreement, or FBO, listed under exclusive rights. So we'll describe in general terms what we think would be appropriate minimum space requirements, equipment maintenance, insurance, staffing, hours of operation for each of those single operations. Some of those then typically are combined and provided by the FBO, but I think in your particular case, instruction is subleased or sublet to another operator. So there would be standards with regards to subleases as well. So we'll want to talk about fuel, ramp service, hours of operation, and we'll establish that framework and put a draft document together for review by the group and provide an opportunity for comment. And then we'll just work through the various issues with regards to minimum standards. We'll go and expand on that a bit to include building, working with obviously the city and the building code requirements, or making at least reference to those should the private sector continue to build additional hangar storage facilities. So that's one of the tasks that we're going to undertake. And I believe Tom, I didn't know if you wanted to mention the effort that with regards to looking at acquiring a scenario where the city would acquire the property underlying ground. We'll look at that and possibly determine then valuations with ground versus building elevated structures. And explore scenarios where the city may acquire one or more of those assets, either separately by donation, gift, or by a grant, if one can secure a grant and assistance. So we'll look at that as well. One interesting thing, Tom did provide a document that I took a look at regarding property tax exemption. And in reading that, I think one could develop a scenario, consider a lease kind of arrangement where the FBO building, if continued to be privately owned, or any other structure, if it's leased to the city for public purpose, the question then is that property tax exempt. And I think a lot depends on the words public use, public benefit, and not exclusive use. So we'll kind of look at that as well, but just reading it, it appears that to me that there would be some opportunity to consider such a scenario, at least test it out and get reaction from others. So that's kind of, I guess, what we're doing or what we will be doing at this moment in time. So Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not specifically to the minimum standards. I mean, I did put on the agenda a discussion regarding the land donation, but I think Jerry covered it well. One of the first things we need to do is really have an understanding of values. So we did order an appraisal, and we're going to get values established for buildings, land, and ancillary facilities as well. So that'll help us in a conversation about where we go with the request for or the donation request. So until we have that, and I'm not sure if everybody on here is aware, but land transactions are through the roof right now, and as is buildings. So getting an appraisal is not something that happens overnight. So we're out to the beginning of May as a time frame for the completion of that appraisal. So I don't know how much detail work we can get done. I know Jerry and I were trying to figure out how some of these land leases or hangar leases have occurred at other airports and get some sample or go by style lease arrangements just for full understanding. But at this point, I think we'll continue some of those back channel conversations about how something could be structured. But I think until we get a real appraisal done, it's going to be difficult to do a formal response. Would you say that's a good summary, Jerry?
Oh, I think that's excellent. Yes, I think that's crucial that we have an understanding of value so we can better make decisions or recommendations. And then as far as leases, we can provide a framework for land lease, building leases, and look at it from the standpoint of subleases as well, since we have a good amount of facility owned by the private sector at the present time. So I think one of the scenarios, obviously, that's going to come out of this is as we move towards a public airport or a public-owned airport, I think that will have also some bearing on how we view through the fence type of arrangements. So I think initially we kind of started out talking a lot about through the fence. We might actually, through the course of this effort, almost develop a scenario that maybe takes us in a slightly different direction, where through the fence, well, it may remain, may not be the number one priority as we try to put the airport in the position of NIPIAS entry, or trying to get into the NIPIAS and moving it towards more consistency with FAA views at the present time.
Jerry, one thing Grant and mentioned to me in another conversation, and Grant, feel free to elaborate if you will, but the council, when they were talking about, some of the first priorities, we're talking about some of the safety concerns, and wanting to ensure that, from the perspective of where we stand today, if there are glaring concerns with regard to safety, that maybe we would want to address those. And I think, in the last few months, committee members have mentioned some of those items. Tim, I know, has, and so I that may be something as well. I know we enter an agreement and try to work out a scope, and then everything has to be done at once, right? But as we look at the minimum standards, we'd be looking at those types of situations as well. I would suspect. Is that true?
Yes, it'd be somewhat of a risk management, risk issue-based assessment.
Perfect.
So we obviously want to minimize risks, and then with respect to minimum DOT or FAA standards, look at deficiencies there as well, and those may require physical improvements to address them, primarily separational distances, obstructions, approaches, these kinds of things become quite important.
Yeah. So Tom, thanks for bringing up a topic that I did say something about that I remember. I really appreciate that. I would just, for everybody's benefit, certainly Randy and I have talked about safety related risk management, and that there's an imperative there. Certainly Randy, from his insurance background, has a refined view of those implications. And I would just say, I think there's a general sentiment across the city council that we are attentive to anything that we can do to remediate safety issues, as the airport exists now, so that we are in as good a stead as we can possibly be. Randy, comment if you see that differently, or anything else that you want to add to that. Yeah, I think you're on mute there, Randy, or something's not working.
So sorry about that. We've only got 15 things plugged in and call it a microphone. I just want to say thanks. I totally agree, and I don't think there's anything I can add to that. Thanks, Grant.
Tom, question. This is John. When we're talking about minimum standards, we're dealing with what we have in the current ALP, correct? Is that what we're dealing with? Because we don't have a 5,000 foot runway. We'd like to, but is that what we're talking about, dealing with our current plan in place?
But I might ask Jerry to he might be able to explain that better than me. Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, I, I think, well, your current plan that has been adopted, the airport layout plan, as that exists and has been approved and accepted, that's the guidance that we're going by for based on present and future decisions, the ultimate development scenario that was created several years back. So when we look at safety concerns with regards to minimum standards, it covers a wide range, not only from an airport development point of view, runway safety areas, object-free areas, protection zones, and all of those things. We'll also be concerned with having fire extinguishers where they need to be. Simple things like that from a risk management kind of point of view. Spill prevention plans for dealing with hazardous waste. These things I kind of lump together under safety concerns. But I think what John is making reference to is the airport layout plan itself as it's presently adopted. Does it provide and show what's needed for protecting the and accommodating the RPZs, the safety areas, the object-free areas, all those kinds of things that are associated with a runway, ultimately showing a full parallel taxiway, the separational distances, safety areas associated with the runway and taxiways, the use of displaced thresholds on an interim basis because we have an off-site obstruction or incompatible land use that we may have the runway facility when temporarily have a displaced threshold. And then ultimately moving forward to correct those deficiencies. If it's a land issue, then obviously land acquisition becomes a top priority, especially with regards to providing the safety and object-free areas beyond the ends of the runway. That's really very critical, and as is the runway protection zone. And whether we acquire that through fee acquisition or through easement, a surface and overhead navigation easement, those are some of the tools that can be available to acquire a sufficient property interest to enhance the airport operating environment and safety. Is that kind of the direction, John, that you had in mind for your question?
Yeah, yes, that was my question. Is this,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things we need right away, and this sounds like a really good exercise.
Yes, there is, and the group will need to prioritize those as well because some of these are fairly costly undertakings, and so obviously safety becomes number one, and meeting and providing for standards probably is our number two. Guidance in terms of ranking and setting priority, and then ultimately and lastly expansion. But your overall goal, as Tim mentioned, is to be able to accommodate the heavier and larger aircraft, and that's where your plan takes you. But
if you don't mind, I'd like to interject that I guess the things that aren't costly are the things that I think need to be introduced and accelerated quicker than what we've been doing. We don't have any standard taxiway or runway signage out there currently. And I think that's a must, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to do this. My concern is runway incursions, both public and incoming traffic. We don't have the standard taxiway signage, and I think that the liability on that is through the roof if we don't get that taken care of as quickly as possible.
Speaking of runway incursion, that has become really in the last couple of years a big issue with FAA, where you can no longer have direct access, say, from an apron to a runway. You have to be able to execute a turn onto a taxiway and then another turn onto the runway. So those are things that, looking at the airport layout plan, those are things that can be done fairly quickly. And FAA is making a real effort to eliminate, and they exist at virtually all the airports. Even when you were in Pella, looking at that, you probably noticed there was direct access from the apron right to the runway itself. And that would be corrected if it weren't being relocated, but there is an effort to correct those. I mean, airfield signage, guidance signage, yes. And then traffic patterns also becomes an issue as well. Keeping objects out of the traffic pattern, that would compromise both visual and instrument. Grant, did you have, you had a safety concern? Are there any other items that we didn't touch on, or?
I think my concern relative to safety, and I'm channeling Randy here and the balance of council, I think fairly accurately. It's just that that's a general topic that there needs to be some, expert assessment relative to prioritization of items. And, in that, recognizing there's going to be some costly things that we need to factor into the longer range game plan. But I think we need to understand potential, relative cost, the individual items' criticality of doing sooner rather than later, and maybe some understanding of any given item. Is it generally easy to complete, or is it more complex and difficult to complete? So, I guess it's just really to understand what our risk profile is, delineated across any deficiencies that might be identified or enhancements that are desirable, so that then we can, certainly from a legislative standpoint, provide staff direction as to how to proceed, and then make the resources available to do that expeditiously. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's just rattling around in my head, and hopefully I haven't, stated anything that's really contrary to the balance of my council colleagues.
I think that's a good comment, and along with what you just said, once one establishes the risk priority, and was pointed out by Tim, some of the items are costly, some are not as costly. And if they're safety related, they're also a very good candidate for state DOT funding, commensurate with the amount of revenue the state might have at any one time. So I think based on both what Tim said, John and Grant, and Randy's point of view, we should be identifying those action items that enhance safety, have an immediate benefit that can be extended, that aren't of the magnitude where we would have constraints to implementing them, and those that we could possibly get then assistance to do so. Whether it's a 50-50 grant or an 80-20, it all helps at the end of the day.
So
Yes.
this is Bob. Real quick question. I might have missed this. Maybe it was stated, but at what point in time do we think we'll have this list of potential safety issues or other items that we need to address?
I think we can prioritize them maybe for the next meeting, or have the list, and then we can have a discussion and prioritize them. Let's say the next meeting. While we're waiting on some things relative to the appraisal, and some of the other tasks that we're going to carry out, then I think we should maybe go ahead and do this for the next meeting. What do you think, Tom? Is that okay with you?
I'm super excited about it. I am. I think this this is awesome. Yes.
Okay. Let's plan on it for the next meeting. We'll have a list. I may have my opinion, but a lot of times my opinions don't count. So we'll get your opinion as to what the priorities are. And then we can have a good discussion. Obviously, I'm always keeping finances in mind. We have risk and we have costs. So we'll try to target those that we can implement in a seamless manner. So
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
What is some of the status on some of the things that the committee has already identified as priorities? I know the beacon is one that we were looking into, and also redoing the entrance to the airport so that we could get fencing that would adequately section off the taxiways from the car traffic.
I can speak to that. Some of those items are tough. For example, the beacon, we can apply for state funding for that, but we can only apply for state funding if it's on city-owned property. So then the whole donation, land acquisition plays into that as well. Same thing with doing parking lot improvements. Right now it's on private property. Spending public funds on private property is a very gray area. And so that's why it's kind of been put on hold until the land acquisition / all that has been figured out, basically.
All right, thanks.
Okay, anybody have anything else, or can we move on?
I want to go back to Mike's comment on the beacon on the public property versus private. We might ask the question, can we put a rotating beacon light on a leasehold area?
We can, it was just Jane, our other consultant. We were going to try and do some emergency DOT funding, but they would not let us apply for that funding because it was not on city-owned property, is what
Okay.
she.
Okay, I think that's it. We've kind of, I guess, talked about the land donation update. Tom, do you have anything else to add to that, or
No,
we covered it fairly well?
nope. That would be a.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, the solar panel discussion. Who's handling that?
That'd be me. I really, for just a question to pose to the group for I think just a little bit of discussion, and just simply because I'm not operating as an operating pilot, I'm asking for some perspective. When we adopted the zoning regulations relative to the airport, there was a definition of solar panels identified, which was pretty broad. And it did not allow for solar panels in the transitional zone or the approach zone, indicating that they were non-compatible. I think we're gonna, and to that point, we've received a building permit application from Lynn County for review to place solar panels on the roof of Culver's greenhouse, which is located in the transition zone. Not unlike the solar panels that I believe are on top of the FBO building as well. I believe there's solar on top of that. Steve, you may be able to confirm that, but so just as we move forward, we're going to have to respond to this. And, there's only a couple options just by virtue of
Tracy, will you?
the permit. And that is, we'll either have to make an interpretation that the panels discussed in the ordinance would be more in the style of a utility panel, or utility solar panels, such as like, a field, like if Alliant was going to build out an acre of solar panels opposed to panels placed on a building for individual assistance to, heat, cool, and provide electricity. So that's kind of the conversation that we've got going on. The other question, I guess, is whether we should just amend the ordinance and define solar panels and create a magnitude of what would consist of an issue. So right now we're just looking at panels on top of Culver's building. I'm just wondering if there's any perspective that you guys could give me as it relates to, are these issues, are they concerns? As I go to airports and see, to me, it appears as though there's solar panels almost on every major airport facility now. And so I didn't want to make any hasty decisions and amending ordinances or variances and such without, at least having a brief conversation with you guys regarding this. So,
Tom, do you know why that was put in the zoning in the first place? I don't recall that ever being discussed. And maybe it was just a detail that,
yeah,
I don't know.
It was a detail. It was there's probably 6 or 8 pages of uses, and then whether they're compatible, non-compatible, or require additional review in all of these zones. We used as guidance the airport guidebook. Honestly, I think I can make it as the zoning administrator. I think I could interpret it as meaning solar fields by means of a utility field. Like, so if Alliant came out and said, we want to build 2 acres of solar panels, I don't know if that would be a great thing to have in the approach zone or the transition area. In my own mind, I don't see it being a major issue if a commercial building puts 150 foot by, 3 rows, 150 foot of solar panels to heat and cool or provide electricity to their building. I think at one point in time, there was probably a glare factor of some sort that would cause problems for pilots. So I'm just looking for some perspective from you guys.
Yeah, I can tell you that the solar panels of the day don't reflect light. I mean, like they are on top of the FBO. You would never even know it in a plane. So
that's kind of what Jerry and I had talked about this last week, and that was kind of the same thing we were noting as well. But obviously, I just wanted to get a little feedback. I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but to me, it doesn't seem like a major issue, but I'm not up there trying to land an airplane.
You've got you're going to put up a bunch of south-facing mirrors at an airport that has a north-south runway. And so there's going to be times of the year, times of the day when anything on the surface can reflect, and what you're doing is mounting a bunch of stuff facing south into the sun when I'm trying to land going north, and you're blinding me potentially. That's what I would want to see. What I would want to see studied.
I can honestly say that I've never seen any issues with the solar panels that are on top of the FBO at this time.
Yeah. Some of the indication that I've had is that they are different from what they quote unquote used to be. They're black, and they're made to absorb more than they ever were as a reflector previous. So anyway, I just wanted a little, anybody else has any comments on that? That's just something we're dealing with from an ordinance perspective. They did file, Jerry, help me out with the number again.
7460.
7460, that's where. I'm gonna write that down. Form with the FAA to see if they could put them out there. I think that's for about any kind of questionable thing that they can get that. And we do have 2 people that have placed their name and application in for the zoning board, the Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment, and we can get that appointed. And if there's a desire to move that through expeditiously, they can apply for a variance to that. And I think we'll probably try to use the response from the FAA on the 7460, as well as if were serious concerns here from this group. So in that review process, I'm sure we could get some kind of report out from the company that's proposing to place the panels on the building and understand where they're facing. I believe that they'd be facing more of a westerly, in a westerly fashion, but I'm not positive. They're on the west side of the north-south running building on the Culver's property. The original placement was directly north of Airport Road, facing south and lining the road for about 200 feet. So I could see those may have been and they were ground mounted. So to Craig's point, they would have been on the ground mounted directly facing the runway if you were landing from the south. Anyway, that's just something I'm dealing with in the world of zoning as it relates to the airport. I just wanted a little feedback from you folks.
Hey,
I can
Tom,
honestly say, unless there was lasers attached to those solar panels, I'm not really worried about those.
Yeah.
We fly over gigantic cities all the time that have solar panels mounted everywhere, and I have never had a problem with them.
Okay.
So, and I know Bonnie flies a lot more than me, but my 150 hours a year, I've never had a problem with it. So that's my response.
Okay.
I've never had an issue with them either, anywhere, but I never even knew the ones were on top of the FBO for a long time.
If there's going to be any kind of a problem, it isn't going to be continuous. It won't happen to everybody. It won't happen every day. It's not surprising that you can fly for a long time. It's just like I've been flying out of Marion for 25 years, and I've never had a problem going directly from the apron to the runway. No one's ever landed on top of me. I've never felt like it's been close to a problem. I've never been in the parking lot and had little kids run out onto that apron. So none of the other safety things that we talk about as being really, really important actually affect any of us on a day-by-day basis. If you're going to be concerned about it, you're concerned about it at those moments when it is a problem, just like any of the other safety issues that we've been talking about. And I don't know, maybe it isn't an issue. I don't know. All I'm saying is it'd be nice to know that somebody considered it and can show, here's our studies that say not a problem. And then it's like, okay, then we're good.
Hey, Tim and Tom, on this topic, I just did a quick little bit of research here through my friends at Google. And there is an FAA document entitled Technical Guidance for Evaluating Selected Solar Technologies on Airports. And so I'll just forward that, and maybe Alicia can put it in the notes or whatever. But it looks like it's really trying, I haven't read it completely because it's 160 pages, but it is talking about solar photovoltaic arrays installed at airports for whatever purposes they have, whether it be hot water heating and or electrical generation. So I just find, and this is a 2018 document, so it's just FYI.
So I can tell you that the two safety concerns out at the Marion Airport are one, runway incursions, and waterfowl. That's the two biggest problems that we have at the Marion Airport. And the waterfowl doesn't have ADSB. They don't care. They just fly wherever they want. They don't talk to ATC. They just do whatever they want. And runway incursions with cars usually happen when people are looking for the dang volleyball court. So those are the two major safety concerns at the Marion Airport. I think Bonnie will agree with me on that, but that's basically it.
I concur on both of those issues.
All right, well, that helps me understand. So I can take the information you guys have provided me. I do appreciate it. I know it's kind of just kind of an ask of you guys, and just, if you all came back and said, oh my goodness, that'd be horrible, that'd be very helpful to, but certainly provides me a little bit of guidance. So I can move on to the Easton development plan quickly if you like. Tim, does that make sense?
Yep, moving on. Yeah, if you want to talk about that East End development plan update, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make the group aware. We had an annexation of property north of the airport, and a little bit west. I'll provide a little more information at our next meeting, but it does. So a portion of the approach zone and some of the transition zone is over this area, so we've engaged with RDG Planning and Design consultant group, planning group, to kind of help us work through a future land use plan out here. And we'll obviously be taking into consideration guidance of the airport zoning. And there's already been some identification of some just some oddities in the zoning. I mean, when we developed that, we used that draft, the state guidance as kind of a go by. So I could see us coming out of this asking a few questions of this group, as well as others, regarding some of the land use conflicts that we could potentially have out there. So just be aware that we're looking at that area. The consultant group is in town meeting with the city, property owners, and different folks associated with the development. And we will ultimately come out of this with a future land use plan that goes essentially from the edge of, I'll just use Squaw Creek Mobile Home, from the west, the east edge of that mobile home, all the way out to the Hinman Road extended, and then Fernal Road or 29th Avenue extended past Highway 13. So it's a pretty large section of ground, and we will just keep the group posted on where we're at with that planning. I just think it's of note, and you guys would want to know as we talk about future land uses north of 151. We will be identifying them directly across and underneath the approach zones and transition zones. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. I just didn't want you to hear it out in the community before you heard from us. And hopefully at the next meeting, I can provide a good report out on kind of some of the recommendations coming out of that group.
Tom, is that the Rookwood development?
Yeah, so it's just east of Rookwood and their next phase, and then we're calling it the Easton Marion sub-area plan, or the East Marion sub-area plan. So just I don't know if everybody knows, and I don't have to belabor this too long. There is the school does own property on the very northwest corner, and I literally mean the corner of the approach zone, and they're primarily that ownership was for an elementary school. I don't believe the school building itself would be in the approach zone, but the approach zone would touch their property. And I can tell you that a school and approach zone is also one of those uses that's identified as a non-compatible. So you can see we're running into a couple issues as it relates to zoning. My question is whether it's the school building itself or the land. So we'll split those hairs later, though. I just wanted the group to know what's going on as it relates to long-range planning north of the airport.
Okay. Moving on to item number 5, the future meetings discussion. Who's handling that? Is that you, Tom?
I believe that was me, and I'm trying to think of what we were going to talk about. Mike, can you help me out? What was that? Do you recall? My apologies.
Was it
Was that
an
virtual?
in person?
It was.
Guys.
Thank you, Bob. That was the question. So I don't know what everybody's comfort level is. There are groups that have been discussing coming back and meeting in person. You know, I think at minimum, and Alicia, tell me if you think I'm wrong in what you're seeing in other committees, because you handle a lot of these. I wouldn't suspect that we'd want to start this back up until July, but it's just a question. Certainly up for discussion, and certainly no pressure on behalf of the city. It's just, you know, we're starting to get to that point and people are starting to meet in person. It's just, what are your guys' thoughts?
I'll start. I'm comfortable with it. So whenever we can get back in person, I'm ready to get rid of Zoom. So I do Zoom at work all the time. I'm ready to get rid of it. So that's my input.
All right.
I've been fully vaccinated February, so I'm good with it anytime.
Okay.
I have no problem meeting in person.
All right.
Tom, would you do a hybrid?
I think we could do a hybrid.
Do a hybrid if you meet, or that way it works too if somebody's out of town.
Yeah, I do like that
What
option.
other groups are doing, you have the option to attend virtually or in person. We will still continue the virtual option for the public for a few months now. So it would only be committee members in person, and it would be here at City Hall.
Okay.
I would have been happy to meet in person the entire time that we've been forced to stay at home. As much as I prefer not to be around people, that's really the only benefit that it has for me. The less time I can spend with other people, the better off they are and the better off I am.
That is a totally Craig response.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It's the only one I know how to do.
All right. Well, we'll take that under. We'll note that, and maybe we'll talk about it again in June, just to verify. But we'll, as Alicia said, we're just starting to see different, things are loosening up, so it'll be good. Mike, I hate to put you on this. Is Mike still on? I hate that. I was just going to ask, there were some emails flying around about the lighting. Did you get resolved to that? I think you were looking for them, if we were able to go ahead and have someone fix that.
Yeah, so I need the city manager or the acting city manager to give me permission to fix them.
So moved.
Yeah.
There you go. So we'll be fixing the lights.
Aye.
Okay, so we got that taken care of. That was fun. Anything else you need fixed at the airport?
You really want a list?
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
question on item 4, is there going to be public meetings on that East End development plan?
So yep, absolutely. We'll do it'll essentially become a part of the comprehensive plan. So it'll be a long-range plan, a sub-area plan that'll be adopted through the Planning Commission and City Council. So, but we'll probably present it to this group before that. So once we get a solid recommendation, we'll do a formal presentation to you guys, and then taking some input as well. So, yep.
Okay, great. That's a big area.
Oh, it's massive.
It's huge.
And actually, some of it's not even serviceable, but we wanted to make sure that we could at least provide some general guidance. We're going to do a really detailed planning effort for essentially 2 quarter sections from the existing city limits line, or I guess it'd be 1 quarter section because they did annex the property. And then we'll have a generalized land use plan that kind of takes it out to that Hinman Road North area. So
The just information, the water department does have some property out there anticipating water needs in the future. So,
yep.
no towers that I know of, at least. So,
yeah. So the players at the table are, you got the developer, the school, there's parkland that's been donated, and then also water department. So there's a lot of interest being weighed as a part of that planning document. And so therefore we thought it might be best to bring in a facilitator that can kind of walk us through some of this. So they're meeting with all the different landowners and property interest out there. So.
Okay, great.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Okay, let's adjourn. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Have a good night, guys.